Welcome back to the Fertile Dark, where we explore the depths of psychology and spirituality to uncover insights and practical tools for personal transformation and self-discovery. I'm your host, Daniel, and today we have a very special episode on the importance of creating sacred spaces featuring my good friend, Jess Arburn. Jess is an interior designer and the visionary behind Own Your Life, and she specializes in using human design to create what she calls sanctuary spaces that really help her clients embody and express their authentic selves and deeper purpose. I really enjoyed our conversation today, and we dove into the intersection of human design and the intentional creation of space. We explored how to connect deeply with our environments, as well as how to start small to create significant change. And Jess shared her wisdom on transforming ordinary spaces into extraordinary sanctuaries that nurture the spirit and elevate the soul. So settle in and prepare to be inspired by Jess's unique insights on how to create spaces that truly reflect and support your authentic self. And I hope that you enjoy this enlightening journey as much as I did. Something that we've talked about and that you talk about is the idea of intentional space design. And I'm curious, from your perspective, what does that mean?
What comes to mind when you say that, and there's a variety of course, as a designer with every project, everyone's different. So I'm always considering the person. But what comes to mind when we talk about intentional space is, of course, what we put in it. And curate comes to mind for me, where everything that comes into a space comes in with a need, an intention, not to use the word to answer the question, but really like what is in the space comes in with intention, not just let's create a dining room and here's this item and here's this item and this is pretty and this looks great. I love that. That's always going to be the end result. That's fun. But who's in this dining room? How many chairs do we need? You know, who are we inviting in? And when we invite people in, what do we want this space to do? And what are the things and items that allow for that? And that's going to be a different answer for every person. But if you just asked me to come in and design your dining room, I could make it look amazing. I could fill the table with settings and flowers and all sorts of things. But is that conducive to how you're using your space? So for me, intentional design is to really go a little bit deeper, think about how you're using the space, what it's for, and the meaning for every individual that's going to be in it.
I love that it's not just the purpose of the space, but also the people that the space is for. When you consider intentional space from the perspective of human design, how do those things merge?
Ooh, this is where it gets really fun. Okay. So we're kind of, if you can envision an iceberg, right? A lot of what I've done, and I've been an interior designer for 15 years, a lot of what I've done is what I would consider the tip of the iceberg. And as I've become more experienced and more competent and more confident in my work, I think I've begun to naturally dive into deep down, below the water. We're kind of getting in a little bit more into intentional space and really understanding how people use space and what they use it for. I think a more seasoned designer is always going to do that. That's not a new concept. The thing that, as I go a little bit deeper down that into the water and what's not really very typically uncovered is this aspect of human design, or just this aspect of knowing yourself. I've chosen human design as sort of the format to look at that from an interior designer perspective. So the sort of summarized version, and I have paired with a wonderful human design guide who will do much better, will give this topic much better information. But what I will say, human design is to understand yourself from a perspective of your strategies, your energy type, your aura, how you receive your environment, which is where I'm very interested in, how you make decisions, how you show up in the world, And human design is really based on what you would call your cosmic imprint when you're born. It's based on the time, the location, and what was happening in the cosmos at that very moment. And you kind of get a cosmic kiss. I love that I just said that.
Yeah. That's just a beautiful metaphor. A cosmic kiss. What's that like for you to be in that space of bringing that approach in?
Well, I'll say it's fairly new. I don't have a breadth of experience with that. I have my own experience, and I am beginning to bring in clients with this interest and this curiosity, much like yourself. What is this human design thing, and how does this fit into my space and my so. I'll speak from my perspective first, my own experience with human design. I got into it about 2 years ago, and there's essentially different strategies and different energy types. Myself, I'm a projector. For anyone that listening to this that does understand human design, I'm a projector. So my strategy is, from my energy level, is to wait for an invitation. I have what's called my energy type and my aura. They call it a penetrating aura. So it's this ability to kind of get into things, people, their own energy in a compassionate, understanding way. And I can see things in people that's very special to, my cosmic imprint, my cosmic kiss, basically. And there's some things that go along with that ability. And there's a variety of different energy types. There's a manifesting generator, a reflector, and there's a variety of different strategies. And these are the things that my clients are learning about themselves through this process of changing their home and their environment. And so having an understanding of those types of things, like how my energy works for me, that it's a penetrating energy that's out there in the world and picking up everything. To be in this world and not know that, I'll let you know, prior to that, I found myself depleted. I found myself taking on things in ways that I didn't need to. And having an understanding has allowed me to have just some type of it didn't inform me on who I am, but it gave me a format of understanding myself and how I go about my day. And when you talk about that, even just the words I just said, going about your day, you're doing that in your environment, whatever that is, your work environment, your home environment. And so being informed just on a, top level. I'm not considering a deep dive into human design, but just having these kind of top level understandings of ourselves to allow for a conversation about your space, that's been incredibly helpful. And quite honestly, something I think that I've always been doing and that most designers do. And circling back to that question about intentional, though, to do it with intention is just a different process. It opens us up to not like a retroactive, I learned this through the process, but step by step by step, informing yourself about your needs in real time as you're making decisions, monetary decisions about purchases. There's a very 3D version of this. It's a different process. It's one that I'm exploring and I'm happy to keep talking about.
Yeah, I'm curious. Because you're talking about how things are different for you now versus before. It seems like the felt experience of being in a space and feeling all of these things, that's not new, but your experience with it is new or different. I'm curious, how has it changed?
Well, it's a lens, I suppose, right? And I guess I referenced learning about human design a couple years ago. And I think that was a modality for me. Everyone has a different one that resonates. This one bringing it into my business felt a little bit more middle of the road without being any one sort of spiritual device. It's a little bit more science-backed as well. I'm not going to get into discussing neutrinos, and there's a whole other level of this. My apologies to anyone who is well-versed in human design as I'm botching all of this. But, there's certainly different levels to that. So the question was?
I'm just curious, like, if you could talk more, like, how has your experience changed as you've incorporated human design into this intentional design experience?
Sure. So I was referencing back to when this kind of came about for me, and I've been on a bit of a spiritual awakening for the past 4 years, and human design came into that. And for myself, and I alluded to understanding my own self as a projector and my energy types and the strategies that work for me, as I kind of surrendered into using those as guides, as strategies in my life, I did recognize differences in myself, benefits. And at the tail end of understanding those benefits, that's when I had the thought to integrate that into my business and my practice, because there are huge benefits in understanding yourself and knowing what you need.
So true, right? There's this deep sense of, I don't know, dissonance when you don't. Like when you don't, like when you feel disconnected from that deep place of authentic self. It's like an unconscious, like something just feels off. Something feels shallow or hollow or just out of sync in some way. And I don't quite know how to put my finger on that.
Yeah. And so here's an interesting thought as you're saying that. And I've done a lot of reflection about, why does one hire an interior designer? What is that? Now, there's the very obvious answer, because I need to design my home. I want my home to look nice. What I've recognized as well, as I'm learning about myself, transformative process, so there's these things going on simultaneously. I'm not living in some sort of vacuum, I'm understanding that more and more my clients, as they're coming to me, they are in some type of a transformative process without being conscious of it necessarily. There's a reason that they're seeking me out. And for some, it's a modality of knowing oneself because something's missing. And it's an external modality for sure. And that's where I see a lot of potential, is if we can have an understanding of why you're seeking this out, why it's important to you at this point in your life. And if we can have a way of having the external need also meet up with some internal growth. I find that the potential in that, and I'm kind of, every time I'm saying this out loud, I'm kind of defining this and creating this as well. This isn't like a defined practice for me, but more of an observation over time. And certainly a designer becomes a confidant. There's transformations in life that are happening, not always good. Some of them are wonderful and good. You got a new baby coming into your life and you're preparing for something new. Or I've been very blessed to be around these beautiful parts of life. But I've also, as a designer, I've been through some of the challenging parts of life, abilities, loss of people. There's definitely a variety of those things. And I've been there in someone's home, part of that process. And so it's an interesting question to step back and really see, for me to start to ask my clients, or just kind of, if they're not open to that, I'm not trying to, as a projector, I must wait for an invitation. That is my strategy, for me to come full force, because I do have the ability to kind of be a penetrating energy. I have a channel in some way to kind of force myself in a way that's not always appreciated. So I have to really kind of connect with that. But as I contemplate my clients and I get to know them and love them, really think about what is it about, maybe, and this is typically at the tail end, but I'd love to bring it into the beginning. That's more of the intention of the process. What is it about the design process that why were they seeking this out? What was going on in their life that this happened? And so, yeah, there's a big, for every individual, it's going to be different. And I just think it's an interesting perspective or lens to have. So I use my own lens that I learned for myself, and now I'm kind of applying it into my business life.
I love that. Even just the intention setting in the question, like, why are we doing this? And I mean, something that you and I have talked about and that you've mentioned in other settings is how so often the why can be more performative versus transformative. I mean, there's this idea in transformational economy, where if you're not moving towards transformation, you're moving towards commodification. So you're either increasing in transformative value or you are like reducing value so that it is really just a monetary exchange. How do you help people go from a performative place of design to a transformative place of design?
I love that question so much. It's really just the essence of everything I'm talking about. And I appreciate that question so much. So that actually really brings me into where I've transformed my own business perspective, my own practice. And what I've transitioned into or transformed into, I'll say, is out of the performance and into the transformation. Oh, I love this so much. This is I can't wait to talk about this. Okay. Let me backtrack a little bit about my past experience as a designer. So I was on the East Coast practicing. I had the most amazing mentor, amazing mentor. And in hindsight has set me on a trajectory of spiritual, I can't say the word enlightenment seriously, but it is what it is. It's exactly that. He's the first person that I came into contact with that had gone through the process. I didn't know what that was at the time. I do now in retrospect, and I've connected with him about it. He's an incredible person. You should meet him. But I was practicing very high-end design. So when I say high-end, I'm talking monetary. I'm talking the money part. I had the benefit of coming on as an assistant, as an apprentice when I was still in design school. And my very first job ruined me from the beginning because I was able to work on, in Washington, D.C., a Saudi Arabian princess's house for herself and her entourage. Absolutely incredible. So when you talk about performative, that's where my head goes. The beauty, the look at me part of it. Not to say that there's anything wrong with it. There is not a judgment to it, but there's a reason for doing things on a certain scale. And so that was where I started. I mean, that is really where I began my career. The East Coast is a different type of space as well. Where we are here in Arizona, it's a little bit more laid back. There's certainly parts of that everywhere, but and so I was fortunate enough to kind of practice on that level. And as I was in that space, kind of in my early 30s at that point, I began to realize that this wasn't, while I loved it and appreciated it, and the clients were incredible. I mean, there's nothing negative about this. And the people, they were coming in with a need. So there's nothing critical about it. There was something missing for me. I wasn't necessarily connecting with the people that I felt would benefit the most from this type of design. And so for me, that was a transformation in itself, out of the performative and more into the transformational. I guess I didn't know what that meant though. So that's kind of the backstory of it. And where I am now, just to kind of jump ahead, I'm in this, what I'm calling design of sanctuary. I'm calling sanctuary space design. And it's not any one, I'm not necessarily setting up altars and shrines with, crystals and, that sounds awesome, actually. Like, I'm super happy to do that. But a sanctuary space is going to be personal to the individual. And I think that's the difference right there, is the intention. Again, like, we're using these really good words, intention, transformation, expansion is one of my favorite ones. And this space that has the ability to, what I call, anchor in and create a sanctuary as a safe space, right? For us to be who we are.
I initially was doing Middle East studies in my undergrad. Mm-hmm. And I mean, you look at some places in the Middle East and everything's plated in gold. You go to the ATM for gold. Like, there's gold in your water. There's just gold everywhere. And it's very opulent. And there's a different felt sense in that kind of space versus when I walk into my living room and I see all my books arranged by color, like, I feel differently. So I wonder for you, like, from this place where you are so sensitive to the feeling of a person, a place, like, could you describe, like, how does a space feel different when it is focused on transformation and sanctuary?
Because it reflects the person that lives there. It doesn't reflect the design trends of the day. It can, but I feel if I've delivered a project and it reflects the person, not my needs as a designer. I've had this fabric I've been wanting to use, or this wallpaper I've been wanting to use, or this new thing at market that's come out. When it feels like the person, that would be the highest compliment. I think the highest compliment for anyone is to be seen, understood, and then have a space that reflects that. I mean, that process alone. Who doesn't want that? So it's interesting. I get questions about design trends. These are timeless and potentially fluid. And it's interesting from a design perspective. I've always been more concerned with space planning, workflow, the actual space, not the things, so that they conduct whatever needs to happen. And I do believe, I'm one of those people that moves my furniture around all the time. I do believe that life currently dictates needs, and we also need to have the ability to adapt to the changes along the way, much like ourselves. We're adapting and changing. We're not the same person. I'm not the same person today that I was yesterday. Like, how kind of frightening and how wonderful. And so how do you design a space based on the current design trends and have that be someplace that you're going to be able to adapt and transform and change into over the years? I mean, that's where things get outdated, right? And they need to get updated. So I think when you're designing a sanctuary, it's a little bit more of a timelessness.
It makes me think there's this idea of how when you're tapped into soul, like the deepest part of yourself, there's a connection to yourself, but there's also a connection to the place, like the physical place in which you exist. And I guess here I'm just feeling like, so for me, I mostly think about that geographically. Like I'm a trees and mountains and the color green kind of person, which makes Arizona really hard on me. But that's how I've always thought about it, is I think about it like geographically. But here, I guess I'm also thinking about a connection to the room that I'm sitting in. And is that also a place that resonates with like my deepest self too? I guess for me, like, it's hard for me to articulate what that feels like. Like, I feel like there's a felt sense of it. Like, I can walk into a space and I have a reaction in my body, and I don't always know how to articulate that. And I just wonder, like, if you can add some insight to that.
Oh, yes. So what I've learned is that I actually do have the capacity to do that. I have a language, and sometimes I lose people with it. Quite honestly, I'll be talking to clients sometimes and I'll get into this flowery visual language. And I'll kind of look around and realize, oh, I went too far. I lost you. But the translation of feeling to matter, that's it. And so if you can have someone that can translate a feeling, how you want to feel, and can translate that into a concept and almost alchemize that in some way into matter, that's what I do. So yeah, I mean, it's available to you, but you maybe need that translation. You need that key. It's not that you don't own it. You're feeling it, but how do I articulate it? And that's how I think it goes. Like, that's the human design part, the key there. I think for myself as a designer, I can provide the sort of vernacular language of space. But the human design aspect is this kind of shared language of self that I'm trying to create with my clients so that we can get to that, what you're explaining.
Are there feelings that you associate in your own, like that you experience in your body, that when you feel like, yeah, we got it.
Full, I call them design goosebumps. It's crazy. If I say something that like strikes a chord, full goosebumps. When I put something together, it just is. There's just that feeling that comes. It's just the right thing. Yeah. I don't know how it happens. It's kind of magical. You don't know when, and it can be kind of a frustrating process too. You know, that first round of selections like didn't go the way that you wanted to. And then you're kind of like, oh, I've lost a little bit of creative flow in all of this. And okay, I'm going to put that aside a little bit. The creative process isn't that easy. My clients don't always love that. It might take a little longer than you anticipated. But when it happens, it happens. Yeah. Happened yesterday. Yeah. With actual things, materials, just like been working with them, concepts, put them down. Boom. It's it. Full goosebumps. I call them design goosebumps. I don't know what that translates to. Do we have an esoteric understanding of what goosebumps are?
I'm sure that somebody does. But it sounds like there is that feeling of like some kind of energy moving around. There's also a certain, like a felt sense of rightness or like a completeness that comes in.
Like a landing. I love the word anchor. It's interesting. Oh, my brain just went someplace. But, we talked about sacred space. I think that's why we're here today, right? And I've been contemplating that, what that means. And sanctuary is like certainly, even just the word etymology of it is like really just a sacred space. A sanctuary is that sacred space. And I've been getting a little bit into like quantum physics. I feel embarrassed to even say the word physics as a designer. There's nothing sciencey about me, although there is, because quantum is this education or research or deep dive into the things that you can't see. And that's space.
Yeah, there is a space there. There is an experience that transcends our physical senses.
And it's not void. It's not this void. We're sitting in chairs right now and there's a distance between us. There's not a void happening. There's certainly things happening. There's the energetic quality. There's the how you feel, the comfort level. There's a variety of things. And that's the interesting part. And you asked the question, how do we translate a feeling into a space? And it's right there. It's literally creating space to be you. How much space are you going to give yourself? How much space do you have? How much space do you need? And that space, whether you call it the ether, right? God, the Holy Spirit, whatever it is, that space is the felt space, right? You can't see love, touch love, design love, but you can create love in that space, and how is that not sacred? How is every space in between things not sacred? And so it's like our calling to create that. And in my mind, if we really took away all the layers and got down to, below the water on that iceberg, that's why somebody calls a designer. I know I need this, but I don't know what it is. And you mentioned that earlier, that missing thing. And we are in a relationship with our space. Whether you choose to sign on to that or not, it's happening for you. Might as well tap in,
I love this idea of sacred space because the juxtaposition of sacred is mundane. I feel like that's really where we've been dancing that line a little bit of I need a physical space and I'm going to go to the store with money and I'm going to buy things and I'm going to put them in my physical space. And how do I convey a sense that this is more than just a mundane creation, but that there is something here that is more, that turns the key and unlocks and opens my capacity to express my deepest authenticity in the world?
It's so good. And this is where the intention comes. Because you can go to the store and you can buy the things and you can put the things in and you can have an inspiration page and you can have a Pinterest and you can show me pictures and we can do all the things. And this is where, and we've talked about this, I think, where ritual comes in. I don't know who said this, but I love this and I say it all the time. How you do one thing is how you do all things. And I'm probably butchering that too, but you know what I mean? Even the ritual of brushing your teeth, how you put the cap back on, that Karate Kid sort of style of living, right? For us 80s and 90s kids, Ralph Macchio really just wanted to do karate. And, Mr. Miyagi had him waxing and painting. And, through that ritual, through that intention, you are creating something more. And that's the difference. And that right there is not a tangible item. It's the intention that's behind it. So if you're creating a space for yourself and you're shopping and you're buying things and you're checking a box to get that done, there's a different feeling. You can't see the difference. There's a different feeling behind it versus sitting back or having someone help you. Really sit back and say, what do I need?
That's such a good question. What do I need? Because it's so different, like at a fundamental level, than what do I want? Here's what you made me think of. So one approach, like one depth approach to dream work is called dream tending. The guy who developed this is Stephen Eisenstadt. One of the principles is that everything is always dreaming. And it just makes me, what it brings to mind here is that if I approach my space from this place of intention and ritual, it's like I'm connecting to this unseen place, this liminal space where I'm able to bring into the space what is most needed to be there rather than what I am consciously trying to create, where it's essentially the embodiment of the dream, the embodiment of like my soul's dream in the present world. Okay, so I'm going to go home now. I'm so converted to this. And I want to create a sanctuary space in my home. What do I do?
Well, isn't that the big question? That's as big a question as answering what do I need? And I think you outlined that in a beautiful way. How do I bring from this dream world, this part of me that I maybe don't even know, that I haven't even tapped into? How do I tap into that so that I can answer that question, so that I can make that space? And that's the really interesting spot for me. And that's not easy. I mean, that's not an easy process. And I'm not saying I even have the answer for that, because you also have to be willing to go in that space. And something that I found a need based on experience is what I do find is that people in general, especially the ones that maybe have a difficult time making decisions, part of the human design reading or understanding is to understand your decision-making process. That's a whole different thing. I find that people in general do not know what they need. They know what they want, but they don't know what they need. And so let's say I propose something even for a sanctuary space. We've done some preliminary conversations, and it's not hitting. Maybe we need to refine what your needs are, because if we're in this space of intellectualizing what a sanctuary space is, we're not, I call it take the elevator ride from the head to the heart. That's where we need to be. And, I think in so many different spaces, you can intellectualize an emotion. You can intellectualize a past event, a past trauma even. You can intellectualize that. You can have an understanding of it. But are you feeling it? And I mean, if we're not operating in a heart space when we're talking about your space, then we're not going to hit what we need, And if you are having a challenge doing that, taking that elevator ride down, if that's not a practice, by the way, for anyone, that is a huge thing to be able to take that ride from the head space where everything feels like too much and too many decisions. And, I'll kind of stay in my lane from an interior design perspective. There's too many choices out there. And that's typically when someone calls me. They can't decide what they want, and I don't know. And there's this, and then I want this. And let's take that ride down into what I need. And so, I don't have an answer for that, like for you going home, although I do know you enough to know that you can sit and reflect on what you need. And then when you can come to me or even yourself and say, this is what I need, then I can do my magic of translating feeling into space. I can do that, and I can teach you. And we can work on a corner of, I say this all the time, just a corner. It doesn't need to be this big, scary, big overhaul. And then there's a practice. And then how do we take that corner and how do we expand that into the rest of our home spaces? Maybe you have that for yourself. And then how do we bring that into our family space, or who's in my house that's living there that would benefit from that? I personally see huge advantage in children's environment, them having an understanding of space and what feels good for them, and just integrating that as part of their life so that everywhere they go, they're setting up that shop, you could pick that up and put that anywhere. You go off to college and you have this sanctuary space in your own bedroom at home, and whatever that is, like you can take elements of that and bring it anywhere you go, even in your mind's eye. I just thought of that, right? Like you really can bring that concept of what makes me feel safe, what makes me feel inspired, what makes me feel expansive, and you can bring that anywhere. What a powerful tool.
So we're moving from the headspace to the heartspace. We start in a corner and then asking what makes me feel safe, inspired, and expansive. That's like a really beautiful framework.
That's the essence of what we're doing here. And if you start to carve away at the layers, that's really what we're going for.
I wonder if you could just walk me through. So, because this is something that I know about you, is just how consistent and intentional you are at living your life in this heart space. It's one of the coolest things about who you are. And I wonder, could you walk me through what are some practices that you would do with someone if they were to come to you and say, I don't know, can you help me figure that out as I go approach my corner? How do I go from headspace to heartspace?
Well, do you know how much I would love for someone to ask me that question? First of all, thank you for asking that question. What a world we would live in if people really could articulate that question. But I do get asked that question, just not in that intentional of a way, for sure. And it looks a lot like, it depends on the person. As part of my human design as a projector, I kind of have to, the wait for the invitation strategy, the way that I've internalized that is to meet people where they are. So I don't want to push them further than where they are. And I'm a really good read on where people are. So depending on where someone is, I would employ a different sort of strategy or analogy. But the one that I've used the most is the elevator. And it's mostly because someone's in a little bit of an emotional crisis. And that does happen in my business just because life happens. Sometimes I'll recognize that the decision making is getting a little overwhelming. And so there might be a need to kind of just say, hey, what's going on? And it might not be about the choices. I would love to give you this really amazing answer, but what I will say is that it would be specific to the person. So it'd be impossible for me to kind of but the strategy of it would be to give somebody a usable, and this is where it becomes very customized for each person, my individual understanding of each person of that. What's the best way for me to give you the statement of, let's take the elevator down from your mind into your heart, and it might, from a very top level, it might say, okay, I know we have 10 choices on the table. I'm going to take 3 and I'd like you to choose 1. And that's if you think about that, that's a way of taking all the noise and getting a little bit more focused until you can get to the one. And on some level, you're taking that elevator trip down when you do that. So that's how I would meet someone who maybe wasn't actually asking me that question. Yeah.
Yeah, so we're getting out of that like really rational, heady place. We're allowing ourselves to really sink into the body. Like, what am I feeling here about this space? What's calling to me about what needs to be present? Maybe it's a picture, or maybe it's a color or a plant, or...
Mm-hmm. What's your favorite thing? Show me your favorite thing. You know?
What is my favorite thing?
Your favorite? Yeah. I bet you went somewhere. I know I did.
Where did you go?
Well, I think we have a very similar favorite thing, but my books, you know. And for me, for my corner, what books? You know, I have a lot. Which books belong there right now? You know, what are the 3 that are on my bedside table next to my lamp with my picture and my artwork from my child? And what are those things that I want to see as I'm going to bed every night and when I wake up every morning? I'm a big fan of the bedside table sanctuary or ritual. You know, even if you don't pick up those books, like what are the 3 books that you would want to see, or what is the picture you want to see, or, you know, what do you every day, that last moment, you know, create a little, that's a great corner, right?
Bedside table. That is a great corner. Yeah.
It's a good place to start. You do it today.
Yeah. What are my favorite things that I would put on my bedside table that I want to see before I go to bed and when I wake up first thing?
Yeah. Or go look at your bedside table. What's on there? Right? If that's a reflection in any way of, you know, how you send yourself to bed every evening and wake every day, if that's a reflection on some level, not in a judgmental, critical way, but just look at it, you know, what is that saying? Sometimes when we're sick, it's saying there's a lot of Kleenex and water and, you know, interesting things there. You know, it does say a lot.
I'm thinking about all like the random scattered pieces of paper, and maybe I think like a piece of trash is on there. A discarded tie is on there. I actually also, my bedside table isn't even a table. It's one of my sand trays.
Oh, well, that's cool.
And the idea is that I can take the lid off at any point and I'm ready to go to work.
Okay. So there's some intention there.
Yeah.
There's also a piece of garbage there.
It's also covered in random crap right now.
I love it. Let's start the bedside table challenge.
No, that's a great idea. Yeah. Okay. So if we started a bedside table challenge, lay it out.
Okay.
What would we do?
Let's do this. Let's call it a process of contemplation. Let's just go look at it. Not just think about it. So if you're, you know, not just think about it, but go look at it. Go sit there and look at the items. If you don't have one, let's think about that. And let's think about what's there and why it's there. And did we think about it at all? Are there items there that we did think about and they're there for a reason? Are there items that are just there because we didn't? And let's maybe clear some items that we didn't think about, and let's maintain the ones that we did. Let's give them space. And if we don't have items that are there because we intentionally put them there, let's find something. Let's start there. And then we can go shopping. Don't get me wrong. I love shopping. I'm like, it's great. I'm a professional shopper and I do it well. I find things. But I do love that. That's a really good idea.
It just, I guess, like listening to you, like visualizing that experience, like picturing myself in my bedroom, looking at my bedside table. Like I had this question come to mind. Like if my space were to speak back to me, what is it that this person brings into the world that is unique, that only they can bring? I'm not sure I really like the answer that my bedside table is giving me right now.
Well, then let's start there, right? I mean, this is what I was referring to. I do what I do because I do believe that our environment has an impact and an effect on us. Whether or not you care about it, whether it's something you don't consider, it is having an effect and an impact on you. Much like, being outside, different weather, geographical conditions, all of the things. And there's energy. Everything is energy. Whether you choose to believe that or buy into that or not, it is actually happening. And so I'm a big believer in environment and that being conducive to creating harmony in your life.
I wonder, like, when you consider your relationship with your space now, in this time in your life, I'm curious, how are you affected by the space you're in now versus other spaces you've been in the past?
That's interesting. We are in a relationship with our space, and it is speaking to us, and it is saying, this person who lives here, what is it reflecting? It really is. Is it Jordan Peterson? Go clean your room. He has, just like real simple. It does. And it's, I don't want to be a person who has this kind of material aspect, but it does reflect. It does. And we are in a relationship with our space and our environment. That's why I do what I do. So for me personally, my own personal space, I happen to be in a transformative part of my life that I've moved recently. I've combined households with my long-term partner. We have a variety of things going on. I would say that my space currently right now does not reflect me. It reflects a future me. I'm not bogged down by the fact that it doesn't, but I will say that because I am in a new space that's not my own, I moved in with, not combined, the combining of space was me moving in, not a new space together. I have work to do. So everything that I'm considering that we're talking about, like I'm in that space also, and I will say how deeply affected I am by it. It really affects me. I don't want to go as far as to say I'm not happy. I'm incredibly happy and joyful about the things in my life and have appreciation and gratitude for it. But my space specifically, it is daunting for me, to not be in a space that reflects me and how I want to live. But I'm also inspired by the fact that it will. I just happen to be in the place where this is new, and it will. And so that's a fun process in itself. It's something I've considered also on my kind of social media platforms, is to kind of highlight my own process. I like to be transparent and authentic from that perspective. So that's probably something to consider. If anyone's interested in checking that out, I do think that I'll be on that bit of a journey. But I am deeply affected, and it's not where I want it to be. And so I'm on the flip side of understanding my clients where they're coming in saying this isn't right. But I have a deeper understanding of why it isn't and what I need. So I'm not overwhelmed by it.
It's such a beautiful example, right? Where you are in a space of change and transformation, and to feel that your space isn't reflective of where you want to be, rather than being overwhelmed by it, it's inspiring. To say, okay, I've got my starting point and I know where I want to be. It's not there yet. And now I get a chance to create. Now I get a chance to embody through the space the things that are most deeply me, which is so great, because there are times when I look at a space and I throw my hands up and I'm like, oh, it doesn't feel right. And I don't know what to do with it. And I'm overwhelmed. And then I turn the lights off and don't look at it.
That's for tomorrow.
It's tomorrow's problem. Somehow tomorrow's problem just always gets kicked down the road. It's just always tomorrow's problem.
It kind of does. And, it's easy to do. It's not necessarily the priority. We have our basic physiological needs, right? What is it? Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And, we basically operate there. But how do we get our personal space? How do we bring that up the ladder of enlightenment? How do we do that? Where we have our basics, like our bed and our, the things that we need. And then how do we infuse those with some intention?
Moving the quality of our space up the ladder of meeting needs, from basic needs to self-actualizing. What a beautiful image there.
There's such a connection, though. There really is such a connection. You can't escape it, and think about your day. Oh, gosh, your home is your sanctuary, right? and there's always going to be parts of it that aren't what you want it to be. And we have to accept that too, right? Much like we accept the parts of ourselves that are not what we lead with. It's funny. There's a lot of symmetry with that as well. Symbolic symmetry, I would call it. I talk about the entryway. I do talk quite frequently about the entryway to your home, which is where you greet your guests, and then the way that you enter your home, which is typically your garage. Yeah, we'll just let that hang out there for a minute. How are you greeting yourself? How are you allowing yourself to enter your home every day? And garages are garages. They're, again, that not that part you lead with, right? When you invite people over to your house, you're not like, come in through my garage. Well, some people, the trusted, it's an interesting thought process. But, why is it that we reserve our entryway, the best part of our house, the showmanship part of our house? Why is it that we focus on that before we focus on other areas? So much to talk about.
So much to unpack. I do feel really inspired. Like I'm having this moment of inspiration around this where I am really considering like, what is the face that I'm presenting to the world? And also like when we live in a shared space, okay, like if we all come together, like what a beautiful opportunity to be able to understand each other better too. Because if the space is really something that I'm trying to be in relationship with, something that is enabling me to embody something deeper in the world, what a powerful opportunity for connection and community with the people that I'm closest to say like, help me understand you more deeply, like to my partner or to my children. And then together to co-create something that is a sanctuary for all of us. And then to bring someone else in and say like, come into our space, like how different that would feel.
I'm like emotional about that. It's beautiful. We've almost lost that sense. And what a wonderful way to bring that back. I love that so much. It's powerful. It's that, I talk to my kids about subjective truth, right? And curiosity. It's probably like a little over their head. But this is a way, this is a tangible way of visually also creating subjective truth for everyone, One of the biggest challenges for me in my new environment, we have a lot of children. We have 5 total in a small home, and we're working through that. One of the biggest challenges that I have is my morning ritual is everything to me. And I wake up early, and I like to be alone, and I like to be quiet. And creating that for myself has been a little challenging, but it's also provided opportunity for me to express my needs to other parts of the family and say, hey, this might actually feel a little weird to you and different. You might, my stepchildren that I'm now living with, that I've known forever, but I might be a little weird, to some of the things that I need, but through the act of explaining it and knowing what I need and them kind of adapting to that, they have such a deeper understanding of me and who I am as a person. And then encouraging them to, in turn, figure out what that means for them. I mean, I love what you said there, I think might actually be kind of doing that, but to do that with intention again is like incredibly powerful.
I also just wonder, if you can intentionally create a sanctuary for the people closest to you, I think it also changes the way that you interact with the people you bring into your home, where if that's the space I've created and I'm going to invite someone in, I'm going to be more intentional in the way that I interact with that person. I want to have a relationship with you where it's okay to bring you in because you're going to honor the sacredness of my space. And then vice versa. I would then honor the sacredness of your space. And it almost feels like this ripply, I have this ripply kind of image in my mind of how potent and impactful could it be just from starting with a corner in your home to then maybe the living room or my bedside table or whatever it's going to be, whatever my space is. And then we just expand a little bit and then a little bit and a little bit. What that could do to not just me or the people in my immediate vicinity, but a community itself.
It's a practice. It's a home practice, you know? It's we don't look at it like that anymore. Or maybe we never did. I don't know. I don't know. I have to think about that. But it's a consideration of this part of our family that is living. Ooh, what's that? There's a kids movie about a living home. I need to go watch that again. About a home that has life and it lives and it breathes and I think it's a Disney movie. Anyway, and are we treating our home in that way as part of the family? You know, are we caring for it? I mean, just from I don't know if this gets off track or not, but I mean, just from a parenting perspective, you know, if you're creating this reverence for your home, do we need to remind them to pick up their socks and their things? Or if that's already in place, if that reverence is in place, they're maybe just going to do it on their own. I don't know.
It does make me wonder if we were to just look backwards in time at like when our parents were born and when our grandparents were born. And then you say like, what was the interaction with space in those two generations? And then how has that impacted the way that we experience space? And if we were then to change the way we interact with space and say that space becomes sacred, space becomes a place where we go under the surface of the water into the deep places of that iceberg, and we're going to bring that into the surface world. What will our kids' experience with space be? And then their kids' experience with space be? And could we go from keeping up with the Joneses to like space is sacred?
Yes. I mean, I really think that I feel very called into that part of it, especially children. My heart always goes towards these kiddos today that are living in this heavily commodified world. You know, I think the main thing that's different between how our parents and grandparents grew up versus ourselves is the amount of choices, readily available choices, and just the volume of stuff. I mean, most things that I'm dealing with from a very practical standpoint is just too much stuff. So if the stuff that we have is intentional stuff and we love it, it feels different. But the kids don't have that understanding. They don't have that baseline of how it was. It's just how it is for them. And I think that they're missing some quiet. There's a lot of noise out there. They've always had choices. I always bring up, I come from the generation that if you wanted to watch The Wizard of Oz, you had to watch it once a year. It was on in the spring and there were commercials. You know, now they're on demand. They can watch that anytime they want. They can watch anything they want anytime they want. They can buy we can buy anything. Kids are being marketed to. So what a wonderful thought process to create some type of sanctuary, sacred space of the home again, you know. And I think people are looking for that. There's too much, you know, there's too much.
Yeah, if you want to bring out the most important things, you've got to get rid of some things that are in the way.
Yeah, literally create space. Yeah.
I wonder if you have any last bits of advice for people who are listening.
I think the one thing that I didn't quite mention, and I know we've definitely talked about, is purpose. And I believe that we are here to find that purpose, not necessarily through our vocation. Although if you can put those two things together, that's the secret sauce right there. But we are here to find our purpose. And more I recognize that missing piece that you're talking about, it's that. We want to know why we're here. Those are the big questions. And at some point in your life, you're going to ask yourself that question. And I would invite anyone to start in their space. Create a space somewhere that you can push away everything, the not you part of yourself, the imposed obligations, and create a space where the you part can exist. You know, plant a seed, let it bloom into your purpose. And I do believe that that's the thread. That's kind of even why we're here today. And I want to make sure to touch on it, is to really create an environment that in some way will yield the fruit of purpose. And I do believe from my little corner of the world that space is needed for that, like a designated, intentional space for that. And then you can kind of have a psychic space or, quantum space or whatever you want to call it, but a physical one that you can interact with that reminds you that you're here for something.
It reminds me of one of the questions that comes up most often when helping people work through stuff. Something hard comes up. Is it okay to give that some space? And here, what about your purpose? Is it okay to give that some space too? How can people find you? How can they connect with you?
I'm a little bit of a work in progress with that. So I have a business called Jessica Lee Design. That's my local Phoenix-driven interior design business. This part of what I'm talking about is called Own Your Life. Own Your Life _design on Instagram. Website coming up soon. Own Your Life. The word Om is embedded in home. I love it. So website coming soon. Instagram is a really great way to connect with me. And where I will be showcasing my transformation. So I will be practicing what I preach.
Well, thank you so much for making some space today.
Yeah, thank you.
I appreciate that so much. I feel like I've learned so much.
Thank you for the questions. Thank you. Yeah, the projector in me likes to be seen. Questions welcome. Thank you, though.
And that brings us to the end of this enlightening episode on creating sacred space with Jess Arburn. I hope you found our discussion as inspiring and enriching as I did. Jess's insights into the power of human design and intentional creation of space really reminds us of the profound impact that our environments can have on our well-being and our spiritual journey. I particularly loved the juxtaposition of performative versus transformative design. If you're feeling inspired to start creating your own sacred spaces, remember to approach it with an open heart and a curious mind. Start small, listen to your intuition, and let your creativity guide you. And the process itself can be incredibly transformative. For more resources, as well as to connect with Jess and her work at Own Your Life, be sure to check out the show notes where you'll find links to all of her information. Thank you so much again for joining me on The Fertile Dark. And if you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing, rating, and leaving a review. You can also connect on Instagram and Facebook, where we're working to build a community of like-minded, heart-centered people. And as always, I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences, so please reach out to me on social media. I'd love to see you there. So until next time, keep delving deep and embracing the journey.